everyone, good morning. How are you today? It's a new week and I hope you had a very good weekend. All right, today we're studying math and we're still on lesson 12, but today we'll be doing unit 3. So get your student book and open to page 217. Also get all your pencils, your books ready as the lesson is going to start now. Today we are looking at changing the scale on the vertical axis. Remember the vertical axis? We said the scale of our graph has the vertical and the horizontal axis. So let us look at how to change the scale on the vertical axis. Now before we start, let's do this quick warm-up from our lessons last week on handling data. Of course, we started our lessons on handling data last week. In what 4 ways can we present data, or in what 4 ways can we present the data or the information that we're given, or a particular information we're given? In what 4 ways can we present or represent data? I'm waiting for you. You have to be true to yourself. So you're going to write the answers and let's see if you're going to get it correctly. I'm still waiting. I'll give you just 10 seconds more. From what we studied last week, what were the 4 ways we presented data, or the 4 ways that we displayed the data, or we represented the data from our book? What were the 4 ways? What things did we do? Or what part for I don't want to use the word so that you won't know. Okay, what 4 graphs did we use? So that gives you an idea now. All right. Okay, let's see if you got the answers correctly. Here are the answers. The first way is with a line graph. Remember that? Yeah, that's the one we did for about 3 days last week. The second one we looked at was frequency table, where you have the tally and the frequency. Remember what I said about that as well? The frequency table usually shows you how many times a particular information or number occurs. What's the third one? You shouldn't forget this. Pictogram displays information using pictures. And finally, bar line charts. Mohab, you should remember, because you said when I asked what a bar line is, you said they represent information. They're like bars. That's why we call them bar line charts. So these are the ways that information or data is displayed or represented in handling data. All right, if you got the answers correctly, thumbs up. But if not, please look at it again, okay? So you don't forget again. All right, let's go ahead to the next one. Now, I'll show you again what's line graph, frequency table, pictogram, and bar line chart is. Remember this line graph? Of course, I know you will remember. Frequency table, remember? Sure, you will. And the pictogram, the pictures? Yes, you do. And bar line charts represents information in bars. So these are the 4 ways that we can display or represent information or present information in data handling. Now let's get to our objective. What's our objective for today? We want to change the scale of our vertical axis easily and without changing the data. What does it mean to change the scale of our vertical axis? We're going to see it in the course of the lesson. First, do you still remember your vertical axis? You still remember? Where is the vertical axis? Is it the one running from the top to the bottom or from the left to the right on the scale? Which one? If you got it right, great job. This is your vertical axis. It runs from the top to the bottom. That's the one on okay, well, I think it runs upward from 0 to 1000. Okay, so that's where you have the vertical axis, and the horizontal axis is this one we have underneath, where we have between 0 and 10. So don't forget the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. Now, what do we want to do today? Look at this vertical axis. What we want to try to do is to change this vertical axis and then see what the implication will be on our graph. Our horizontal axis is going to be the same, but we'll change the vertical axis. Remember, we are not changing the information. We're only changing the scale of our vertical axis. Remember how I told you to always make your scale? Now, for this scale, what's the interval it has? How much number are we adding up to one number to make the next one? Good, 200. We're adding 200 to make the next number. So on this scale, we have between a scale of 0 to 1000 with an interval of 200 between each of the numbers. What if we change the scale to 500 to 1000 or 0 to 1000? We'll only have 0, 500 and 1000. What would happen to our graph? Of course, the graph will have a little bit of change. Okay, there will be a little bit of change, and I'll show you that in the next slide. Now let's see student book, page 217. I know we've talked about this in the Zoom class, but still, let's look at it. Changing the scale on the vertical axis. Now look at this. Let's learn together. Look at the same data on two different scales. This data is talking about tons of recycling in each month. What's the meaning of tons? Tons is also a unit of measurement. Remember the unit of measurements for mass? Yes, grams and kilograms. Tons is also a unit of measure of measuring mass. It measures the weight of heavy duties. For example, like trucks, it measures the weight of heavy duties. Okay, all right, so that's what tons is, so you don't get confused when we are talking about tons. Now we have tons of recycling each month. Look at the months, January to April. It's the same months we have on the second graph as well. But what do you think is different in the two graphs? Our vertical axis, the scale for the first graph is between 400 and 1000. And then what's the additional units we are making? That's the number between, how much number are we adding to make the next number on the first scale? 100. We are adding 100. So that's why we have 400, 500, 600, 700, and so on. But on the second graph, how much number or how much units are we adding to make the next number? 500. 0 to 500. 500 to 1000. So we're adding 500. Okay? Now, the information, remember, or the data is the same. The months is the same. The only thing that is changing is the scale on the first graph is different from the scale on the second graph. Why? The first person here added 100 to make the next number. The second person is adding 500 to make the next number. Now let us see the information we have in the book. It said, notice the difference between the scales on the vertical axis. That's the difference I just explained to you. The axis on the first graph shows the scale going up in 100 tons, and it starts from 400. But the second one has a scale going up to 500 tons, and it starts at 0. So the first graph gives the impression that there has been too much of variability between the months. The meaning of that is that the first graph makes us to think that the difference between the months is too much. But the second graph gives an impression that the difference between the months is not too much. Okay? Why? Just because of the scale that we have chosen. So we can equally choose another scale. We can choose scale of 200 intervals. We'll be adding 200 to make the next number. So we can have 200, 400, 600, 800, then 1000. We can equally have that. Do you know that that graph is equally going to show in a different way? Even though we have the same information, it will show the differences in the months in a different way as well. Okay, so basically you can change the scale of your graph. You can choose different numbers on your scale. But one thing that you've noticed about the scale is when the scale is going up, the number being added is the same for the next one. 100 added to make 500, 100 added to make 600. Not that you get to 600 and then you add 200. No, it has to be the same numbers you are adding on each scale. All right? Okay, so I have some notes here to share with you. Our vertical axis scale can be numbers between 0 and the highest units in your data. So if your data says, for example, that the highest tons, like this one we just looked at, the lowest tons is 100 and the highest tons is 800, then you can start your tons from 0 and end it on 800. Or if you like, you start it on 100 and end it on 1000. Just make sure that whatever scale you choose, all the numbers can be captured. Okay? All the numbers. So if you choose scale 100 to 1000, between 100 and 1000, you'll be able to make your graph of 100 to 800. Since your highest number is 800, you will still be able to make the graph. Okay? All right. So just make sure that on your vertical axis, all the numbers are between 0 and the highest number or the highest units in the information that you're given. The second thing, the number you add up to make the next number must be the same for all numbers on the scale. I explained that earlier. And finally, when you change your scale, you are only increasing or reducing the number you add to make the next number. For example, I choose a scale of 200. I'm adding up 200. So I have 200, 400, 600, 800, and 1000. Now I want to change my scale. Or I say to you, I am using scale of 200. You change your own scale. To change your own scale means you want to change the interval of the numbers. So you can choose to add up 100 in your own. You will now choose 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, and 800, then 1000. So what have you done? You have only reduced the number that you are adding to make the next one. My own is 200 and yours, you made it 100. So that's just all what it is to change the scale of our vertical axis. So see where we have these heads together. I said, can you think of a situation where you would publish each of the graphs above? Why would the difference in the scale be useful in your arguments? So if you have people you are presenting this information to, and then you want to make a point, about the graph or about the information you're presenting. Changing the scale, how would it help you to drive your points? Well, you can tell them, well, you may think that the difference between the months is so much, but now that I have changed my scale to 500 and 1000, you can see that the difference between the months is not so much. So the lower scale will make it look as if the difference between the months is much, but now that we have a higher scale of 500 to 1000, we can see that the difference between the months is not so much. Okay, so you can make such an argument, or you can make it can be useful for your arguments in the way that I have just said. All right, students, if you have any questions about this, we will take it in the Zoom class. And so we've been able to see in today's lesson how we can change the scale on our vertical axis without changing the data we were given or the information. So try to do the student's book page 218 to 221, all the exercises, and please send your answers to me on Class Dojo. So we have another class tomorrow. Stay safe and have a nice day. Bye.